polymorphism. So polymorphism is a way of declaring objects that we haven't done before. So by looking at this class structure, right? So take a minute to look at this class structure and see which is the most parent class. So there is a cup class. This is a class. This is a cup class. This is a pill class. A box class. This is the pill class, and this is a jar class. All right. And the most parent class, and the answer is pill. So somebody said pill is the most parent. This is the parent class. Why is that the parent class? Box extends pill, and yep. So the box extends pill, and pill is actually not extending anything. Exactly. So it doesn't extend anything. That should be the first indicator that might have been the most parent. So if you draw out the hierarchy, so that would be pill up on top, and what comes below pill? So the next one is box, and I'm going to draw that out. What comes below box? So we have cup, that extends box, that must be below box, and then we also have jar that extends box. So we have two classes right below that, right? So the hierarchy would look something like this, and we have cup. Does that kind of make sense? We have pill, box, cup, jar. So what's the relationship between cup and jar? And what's the relationship between pill and cup? Grandparent, exactly. So we have parent, box is parent to cup and jar, pill is parent to box only. But they also have a pill and cup, and pill and jar also have a relationship, which is just grandparent. So does everything, whatever exists in pill, does that exist in jar also? So whatever exists in pill, does that exist in jar also? So everything that exists in pill exists in jar, unless that whatever those things are been overwritten by box, right? So if there's a function in pill, let's say what function is let's say it's method 2, right? So method 2 in pill and method 2 exists in box also. So which one would exist in jar? Method 2 from pill or method 2 from box? From box, exactly. So remember, whatever function is overwritten, that's the one we're going to be using, and that kind of thing is what we're going to be learning today. So we have different objects have been declared right here. So we have box var1 equals new box. This is simple. We have done this before. Now we have pill var2 equals new jar. So we have a grandparent with a grandchild. Then we have box var3 equals new cup. We have box to cup. We have a parent and child object created. We have box to jar, parent and child. And then we have object to box. Remember, there is also a class, and that's what they're referring to when they this right here. So when they do object, new box, so this is what they're referring to, box and object. So object and box. And the last one is simple, pill equals pill. So that means they're only referring to this object, right? So there is a reason they declared it this way, and that's what we're going to explore, right? So I'm going to get rid of this. The first thing they're asking is var1 method 2. So they're asking what is var1, right? So what is var1? So var1 is declared box. var1 equals to new box. So if you var1 is box to box, right? So now the way the object has been declared, this is where the scope is, right? So the left side, box to box, that means the scope is only box. We don't care about the function in cup. We don't care about the function in jar. We only care about function in box. But if the user calls a function in box, but that does not exist in box, we always go up and try to find it in pill, because the parent and child relationship still exists. So they're looking for method 2, right? So box, we're going to look for box, and box has method 2. The box has a method 2 right here, and all it's doing is printing box. All we're going to do is print box. So that's it for the first one, right? Now we have var2. var2 is pill to jar. So this will get really confusing as we move down on the list. So now we have var2 method 2. var2 is pill to jar. So you determine the scope of the variable, the scope of the instance, which is this right here, starts with pill, goes all the way down to jar. So the scope for this is pill all the way down to char. And they're looking for method 2. We don't look for that method 2 in box or anywhere else. We start with jar. So we start with jar right here. We look for method 2. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me take that back. I'm sorry. So we're looking for method 2, and the instance is declared this way: fill to jar. Now the first thing we do is we look for method 2 and look for method 2 in pill. We have method. That is just like a check mark. That's okay, right? So as soon as we see method 2, that's okay. Then we'll use the most updated version. Now we move down on the hierarchy and try to find the latest version of method. So the method 2 exists in jar, which is just right here. We just print jar 2. So we check pill first just to make sure we have pill that method 2 in pill. If pill doesn't have method 2, that means it's an error. Yes, so if jar didn't have method 2, we would move up to box to find method. If box, move up on pill to find method. We start with pill. We got to make sure pill has method 2. If pill doesn't have method 2, then even though jar has method 2, only the reason is the way it's declared. Only the reason the way it's declared, we look for pill. We look for this. The pill has to have method 2 in order for us to move down to find the latest one. If pill doesn't have method 2, this is an error automatically. And I think we'll have an example of that. All right, so now jar has method 2, and we just print jar 2. So var3 method 2. So var3 is box to cup. The way they're declaring it is box to cup. So now, first thing you should do is declare the scope. What is the scope? Remember, we're working with var3 right here. What's the scope? Well, it starts with box and it goes down to, so it starts with box to cup. So now, var3 box to cup, we're looking for method 2. So the first, where should we check the method 2 first? Which class should we be checking the method 2? It starts with box. We look for method 2 in box. Box has method 2. That's good. That's great. We have it. Then we move down to find the latest one. Then we look for method 2 in cup. We have method 2, which is just cup 2. So we print cup 2, but we're not done with this method, right? So there are more things we need to. Now it's calling super.method 2. Where would that come from? Super.method. We just executed this line, this line right here. Now the next line says super.method 2. So it says super. Remember, we are in cup. The super for cup is box. Exactly. So we go up into box. So we look for method 2 in box. And box method 2 is just box 2, printing box 2. And that's what we're going to do. We come back here, we printed cup 2, we executed this line. There's nothing else more to execute, then we're done. Now we have var4 method 2. So var4 is, what's the scope for var4? var4 box to jar. So we have box to jar. That's what we're working with. And then we have method 2 again. So which class should we be looking for method 2 first? Box to jar. And we're looking for method 2. Which class should we look for the box? So we're going to make sure box has method 2. So box does have method 2. That's great. Now we go down to find the latest one. We don't go to cup to find the latest one. Remember, the scope is just these two right here. Then we go to jar to find method 2, and jar has method 2, which is just jar 2. We print that out, and there's nothing else to execute. That's all we need to do. Then we have var5. var5 is object to new box. So what is the scope here? var5, what's the scope? So that's the scope, and then we're looking for method 2. Where should we look for method 2 first? Object, exactly. So remember, the scope starts at object. We look for method 2 in object. Does method 2 exist in object? So object is generic class. We don't have any control over this. There is no method 2. So this is an error. Now we have var6 method 2. var6 is pill to pill. So what's the scope here? Pill, just pill, exactly. So it is just pill. and the scope is just fill, which is just this right here. And we're looking for method 2, and we look for method 2 in pill, which is just pill 2, and we just print that out. All right, so we have var1 method 3. So what is the scope for var1? So let's look at what's var1. var1 is just this right here. What's the scope? Box, just the box. So the scope is just the box, and we're looking for method 3. We have method 2, they're calling method 2 right here, 3, and it's calling method 2. So which method 2 would it method 2, it's going to be looking for this method 2 inside this class. If it didn't have it, then we would move up. So it's going to be looking for method 2 inside of this same class. So it's going to be looking for this box 2, and then print box 2. If it had super dot method 2, then it would go up on pill and try to find that method 2. But since it's just calling method 2, that means it's somewhere in the same class. So now we have var2 method 3. var2 is pill to jar. What is the scope? Pill to jar. And then we are looking for method 3. Where do we look for method 3? The first, go straight to pill and look for method 3. If pill doesn't have method 3, what happens? Error. If you go to pill doesn't have method 3, so this is an error. All right, so now we have var3 method 3. var3 has a scope of box. Scope is box to cup, like this. We're looking for method 3. Where should we look for method 3 first? Box. So box has method 3, that's great. Now we move down to find the latest one. Remember, we don't execute that one, we just gotta make sure it has it. Then we go down to cup and look for method 3. Does cup has method 3? We look for cup. Cup has method 1 and method 2, that's it. It doesn't have it. We're looking for method 3. So now we go up in the parent hierarchy and try to find method 3, which is, we'll go back to box and look for method 3. And now this is where it gets confusing. So now we execute this method. Now this method 3 is calling method 2. So now the method 2, we do not execute this box one. Remember the scope, we look for the most latest one. We go to cup and look for method. So now it's looking for method 2 because the scope is declared this way. We're looking for the latest one, latest method 2, not within that class. The only reason because of the scope. So now the method 2 will go to cup and look for method 2 in there. Method 2 in cup has cup 2. Then there's more things we need to act. It's calling super.method 2. So where is that method 2 coming from? We go back to box and print method 2 in box, which is just printing box 2. Now we executed this line. We go back to where we started right here. We executed this first line, the second one. And now we go back to where we started, which is method 3. We just executed this statement right here. We still have this statement to execute. So now we execute box 3. Let's do the next one, var4 method 3. var4 is box to jar. Excuse me. Box to jar. Now the scope is this box to jar. That's the scope. And we're looking for method 3. Where do we look for method 3 first? First we go to box, try to find method 3. Yes, box has method 3, great. Move down and try to find method. Moving down means moving down in the hierarchy, in the scope, which is just jar. Method 3 does not exist in jar. So does not exist in here. We go back up to box, which is this class right here. We execute method 3. And now it's calling method 2. Which method 2 would that come from? Which class? So remember, we find the scope. Depending on the scope, we find the latest one. And that method 2 exists here, so which is just jar 2. So we execute this one. Now there's no more lines to execute here. We go back to where we started, which is just this. We just executed this function. We still have this function. All right. So we've done all these. Now, does anybody know what's going on here? What is this? What this is doing, var cup, var1, all it's doing is changing the variable method1 to cup. Yeah, so it's what it's doing is it's changing box, this right here. So all it's doing is it's changing box right here to cup by doing that. So now var1 is going to start with cup, goes to box. That's what they're trying to do. So all these, that's what they're exactly trying to do. They're trying to change whatever is declared to whatever is being overwritten to. So now they're changing box to cup. So now if they do something like this with variable one, is that allowed? So now box, the scope is, what's the scope? So what's the scope? So remember, they're not changing the second one, they're only changing the first one. Scope is cup to box. Is that allowed? No, that is not allowed. Remember, you can only go from top to bottom. You cannot go from bottom to top. So this is actually not allowed. Not go sideways. You cannot go from bottom to up. You can only go from top to bottom. So now we have jar, var2 method 1. So var2 is this, and they're changing this pill to jar. So what they're doing is they're changing this pill and they are overwriting this to jar. So now what's the scope for this now? Just jar. So now we have just jar, that is the scope. And they're looking for method 1. Method 1 in jar. Method 1 is just jar 1. So this is actually posted on Canvas as well, this whole sheet. So if you wanted to follow along, you can. It is under class practice Monday. So if you want to download that on your computer and follow along, you can do that. All right, so next one we have cup var3 dot method 1. So cup var3 method 1. So now what they're doing is, so cup var3 equals new cup. So what's the scope here? Scope is just cup right here. And what are they looking for? They're looking for method 1. Cup method 1, cup has method 1, which is just cup. So we have var4 cup var4 method 1. So we have cup var4 method 1, var4 is right here. We have cup var4 equals new jar. Is that allowed? So here they're doing cup var4 equals new jar. Is that allowed? Nope, that is not allowed because we cannot go sideways. We cannot go from bottom to top. We can only go from top to bottom. So that is not allowed. That is an error. Now we have jar var4 dot method 2. Jar var4 dot method. Now they're changing this box to jar. What's the scope? Just jar. So now the scope is just jar. And what method are they looking for? They're looking for method 2, right? Exactly. So they're looking for method 2, and the scope is just jar. Scope is just jar. And looking for method 2. Where would we look for method 2 first? Jar. Remember, depends on the scope. The scope is just jar. We only look for method 2. So jar has method 2. It's easy. Now we have box var5 method 2. var5, we change the object to box. What's the scope? And the scope now is just box. So now it is just box. That's the scope. And we're looking for method 2. Method 2 from box. Right here we have method 2 right here, which is just box 2. Pill var5 method 3. So pill to box, exactly. So we're going to change, all it's doing is changing this to pill to var5 is box. So the scope is just, and we're looking for method 3, pill to box, jar method 3. So now where do we look for method 3 first? So we have the scope right here. We look for pill. Pill has method 3. So if pill doesn't have method 3, do we move down to find it in box? No. So if pill doesn't have method 3, that we stop right there, and that is error automatic. Remember, all this depends on the scope. We start from the top, then move down. The first we check if it exists in the most parent class in the scope. If it does, then we look for the most. If the parent doesn't exist, doesn't have it, then we cannot go move down to look for the latest one. If the scope was just box, not field wasn't there, then yes, we'll go straight to box and print box method 3. All right, so next one we have jar var2 method 3. Jar var2 method 3. So this one right here, we're converting this pill to jar. What's the scope here? Just jar. Scope is just jar. And now we're looking for method 3. And the scope is just jar. And now we're looking for method 3. So jar doesn't have method, but it won't be an error. Remember, the parent and child relationship still exists. So if you declare an object which is just jar, and you try to call a method that does not exist in jar, what happens? Just like secretary and a legal secretary, if the method didn't exist in legal secretary, we go up to secretary or employee to find it, right? So the same thing happens here. So method 3 does not exist in jar. We go up to box. Box has method 3. That's great. We're going to execute that method 3, and all it's doing is running method 2. So now, which method 2 are we going to run? From jar, exactly. So this method 2 is going to be coming from the scope. Scope is the jar. We're going to go back to jar, look for method 2, which is just jar 2. That's the one we're going to execute. Now we have executed this method. We go back. We just executed this line. We still have this line to execute, which is just box 3. We have cup var3 method 3. So we have cup var3 method 3. Var3 is this right here. We're going to change this box to cup, right? So slash box, what's the scope? Just cup, exactly. So cup, and we're looking for method 3. So we go to cup. Cup right here, look for method 3, does not exist. And the scope is just cup right here. Look for method 3 does not exist here. What happens? Goes up to box to find it. We go up to box, and the box has method 3. Look for, and it's executing method 2. So which method 2 is it going to execute? We go back to cup, try to find method 2, which is cup 2. We execute cup 2, and now it's looking for super dot method. Super dot method 2. Remember, now this it wouldn't be method 2 inside of this class. It'll be the super. Super for cup is box. We will go back to box, execute this method, which is method 2. We print box 2. We executed this one. We go back to this one where we started. We executed all the lines in this method. We go back to where we started in the first place, which is this method right here. And the last thing we need to execute is this line print system.out.print statement, which is this box. So now we have cup var5 method 3. Cup var5 method 3. So cup. So remember, all they're doing is changing this object to cup, and cup to box. That means we're going backward from